Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, brought to you by Music Ally, the show that both looks at the finances of the music industry while also bringing you stories and comments about the past week in the pop business. I'm Steve He's Stuart Dredge. If you want an easy guide to what's going on in the music biz and how it all works, then here we are this week. Coming up, well, there are some very important subjects, I have to say, to tackle this week. There's quite a lot about live music, including one story about the recent budget, outlining how the government's business rate policy may prove to have a devastating effect on venues. I can't stress that enough. Also, the realities of the streaming economy laid bare by the band Los Campesinos, and more reasons to fear that the music industry is simply not prepared for how to properly deal with AI. But first, Stu's big number. What's the eye-catching figure that you've come across this week, Mr. Dredge?
I've gone for a big round number this week, 200 million. And that is, to go back to something we talked about last week, that is how many people checked out their Spotify Wrapped within the first day last week, breaking the previous record.
That's globally? Is it globally?
That is, which I would look at. So Spotify's got 713 million users. So it's less than kind of a third of them saw it on the first day. So a lot of them are still going, I wonder who my top artist is this year. How can I find out? But this is big, and it had more than 500 million shares. To our discussion about this is going to be taking over social media.
Yeah,
500 million shares of people's stories. Which I don't know if you saw this, but one of the big features this year was it gave you a listening age. Have you seen this floating around?
Yeah,
and people going, hang on a minute, I'm not 85, or it was calculated rage sharing of people who said I'm not as old as it thinks I am.
Yes, we shall come back to that in the lock-in, I think. If you want to know what Spotify Wrapped guessed were our respective musical ages, that's later. They'll be very happy with this, though. Although, I mean, it's obviously it's logical they've broken the record because they have more subscribers than they ever had. So it makes sense more people will be looking.
It does, and they really pushed the boat out this year, like I was saying last week, because they wanted to make it a big hit. I mean, the other point that came out of it was the biggest artist of the year on Spotify was Bad Bunny. This could have been the big number. 19.8 billion streams on Spotify this year for Bad Bunny.
Crikey.
Which plays in, I mean, in the US, he's playing the Super Bowl halftime show in February. And there's been a few from the right wing of politics, been a few like, who's Bad Bunny? Why is he playing the Super Bowl? We're not happy about this.
Yeah.
Well, my friends, he's the biggest artist in the world by streams, and that's kind of that's the reason he's playing the Super Bowl.
This week's three big news stories, starting with this one, which again might come as a warning to all artists out there, as more musicians have been complaining about AI music projects that they think are, well, one, too inspired by their own work, or even, in worst case scenario, even pretending to be them. So how did this happen? Tell us. There was one particular story which we're hanging this around, Stuart.
Yeah, so this is about a band called Architects, who are a British metalcore band who are really well. I think they've had 11 albums out. Just finished a big arenas tour. Last album came out in February, and they're kind of basically taking the weight off their feet now after doing this big tour. And then the new song dropped, and fans were like, "Well, hey, a new song from Architects," except it wasn't by them. It was an AI-generated song that somehow came out on their profile on Spotify. The good news here being that the fan base mobilized and got it taken down. They basically, protests were loud enough saying this is not Architects, this is a random AI slop. And it got removed.
So, I mean, in the story I read, then it implied that the other architects, the imposters, were deliberately attempting to infiltrate the real architect's profile. This was, they'd worked out, well, if we put our track up here, it might get a load of traction. But could it, just playing devil's advocate, could it be coincidence? Because I often see bands with the same name where their tracks have been mixed up. Well, I don't know what your take on this is.
Yeah, I mean, it has happened by accident in the past. So, for example, I used to love a band called Ira, IRAH, who were from Norway. And they were very sort of, what do you call it? Sonic Cathedral of Soundy kind of. And then there was a British rapper who turned up with the same name, and his music kept appearing on their profile.
Yeah.
Possibly vice versa. So this has happened in the past with the same name. That's kind of died away. So it does feel like it's an attempt.
It was intentional.
Yeah, and the style of it being similar to theirs, it felt like it was intentional. And then just today, actually, like this morning, I've been writing about a very similar story. So do you remember? I've got to get it right again. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
Yeah,
Is it right? Lizard
yeah,
Wizard.
yeah.
They came off Spotify earlier this year in protest about the CEO's arms investments. But then this week it's emerged that there was a band called King Lizard Wizard who had the same song titles, the same lyrics, but just the music was AI made. So someone had basically put their lyrics into an AI music generator.
Right.
And then if you search for King Gizzard on Spotify, because who wants to type all that in, frankly?
Yeah, yeah.
This artist was coming up. And again, it was on there for a few weeks. It was reported on. It only had a few 10,000 streams, which is kind of small, but it's now been taken down as well.
So, I mean, the thing here is how easy is it then? I mean, if I don't want to suggest that I don't want to make plain the fact that I think the imposter architects, say the imposter architects set out to get onto the real architect stream. The worrying thing, surely, is the fact that they were able to do that. How do you wheedle your way onto another artist's stream? And what are the measures in place to stop this? What can Spotify do? Is there a protocol? Because surely there should be.
You'd think so. And I think this is one of those areas where it's slightly mysterious, but they don't want to let people who are trying to do this for gain know exactly how they detect it and spot it. But yeah, I mean, so this is the difficulty. So there could be another human band called Architects who could upload music. And so there should be there is a system there whereby you may have the same name, but you're not in each other's profiles. And that seems to be something they've got sorted out normally. And the other thing I think this comes from is people are starting to say, okay, who is responsible for this? Is this, how much of this is Spotify or a streaming service company, and how much of it is it distributor? So whoever put the song on, so whoever uploaded it, should they have checks and balances? They say, hang on a minute, you're not the band architects. We're going to check this.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about numbers before about how much being like, I think it's like 110, 120,000 tracks every day being on it. So it is a mountain of stuff that there's no way a human could go through it and say, hang on a minute, I recognize that's a metalcore band in the UK. Are you really them? So it is going to have to come down to some of those automatisms. Okay, well, who is this? How has it got there? So it is, and I think it comes down to something I say every so often, which is like, this is not really AI's fault. It's some humans being bad. Like it's some humans have gone, I know, I'm going to put some fake King Gizzard tracks up and try and get some money.
Yeah.
You know, it's like humans using the technology to do bad things.
Yeah, but that's why. But that's why you have some rules. That's why. That's why it's a justice system. You have to try and prevent people, the bad guys, from winning. So, so it does come back. It does come back to Spotify or whoever. Someone's got to put in place a thing that says, right, don't do this. We're going to stop you doing this.
And to some extent, I think they do. And so part of it is they have to be told if they don't spot it themselves. So when, for example, fans raise their hand and say, this is not Architects, the key then is, do they move quickly to take it down? And something Spotify do is they will not pay the royalties out. If you spot it before the royalties have been paid out, they'll say, no, we're not paying that. And that's what's happened with several of these spoofs.
Right.
People have said, right, we've taken it down. They will not get the royalties. This has not worked. So in that sense, maybe the fact that it gets through is not the biggest worry. It's whether it gets caught and then taken down quickly, and that seems to be happening. But then in the US, there was some stuff this week. So we talked about this band called a virtual AI artist band called Breaking Rust, who are country music, and they're the ones who've been appearing in the charts. And there was some quite fun stuff. So there's an artist called Blanco Brown, who's like a popular human country artist. And it's kind of this Breaking Rust band sound a bit like him, sounds like his vocals. He's quite a kind of gritty, raspy vocal tone. And he kind of, instead of just saying, I don't like this, it sounds like me, he covered their song as a way of kind of pointing attention to the fact that, you know, if they're going to mimic my sound, I'm going to cover their song. And that's an example where it's not someone spoofing music or putting it on his profile, but it is another thing we've talked about, which is artists going, hang on a minute, this AI artist has got 1 million listeners. It sounds a lot like me. It sounds like they've based it on me. And that is, I mean, in this case, he was kind of quite humorous in his response, but that's causing artists equal, I think, amount of, well, not worry, but like, what is it? I suppose you call it creeping anxiety, isn't it? Where does all this lead and what's going to happen to us if it's not stopped? And
Yeah.
it feels like that's rising towards the end of the year, and these are just examples of stories.
Yeah, we were talking off air last week. We must do something more in depth about AI. I know we come back to AI a lot on this program, but the possibilities and the implications of some of the things which may happen next year are really quite huge. And our fear, I think, is that the music industry is still coming to terms with AI and at times is still playing catch up. Anyway, story 2 this week, and this went a little under the radar, this story, unless you were directly a part of it. You may not have heard about this, but the Department of Business and Trade last week announced a major inquiry into, well, what amounts to the whole way the live music industry operates in the UK. It's a huge brief. They're asking for written submissions now, but this, from my perspective, and I'm someone who's involved in live music, this really came out of the blue. This, do you want to explain more? It's a CMA thing, isn't it? It's Competition Markets Authority, I think.
Well, it's the Business and Trade Committee of Parliament. So one of these parliamentary committees, and yeah, it's when they announced it on the 4th of December, and they want written evidence by the 18th of December. So anyone in the live music industry who's like, right, December's time for lunches and Baileys and
Yeah,
Christmas
yeah.
shopping,
You'll
and
be
now,
glad. You'll be glad to know that the live music trade body pushed back on this. I think the deadline, fingers crossed, is being extended to January the 9th or something. So you may be able to kick this one past Christmas, live industry, and then send in your answers after you're back from the festive period. But yes, it was a ridiculously short deadline.
felt
But
very
anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, so it's a Business and Trade Committee. So this is a committee of parliamentarians who look at all kinds of aspects of business and competition and consumer rights and all that stuff. And they did have a couple of hearings earlier this year that I sort of remember that they touched on ticketing as part of them. They had Ticketmaster speak at a couple of their kind of evidence sessions. But yeah, so this inquiry, it's basically asking about trends in the UK live music industry that may, and the quote is, adversely impact market competition or market functioning.
Mm,
So, like competition, obviously, is it a fair market if you want to compete in it? And I guess market functioning is how well it works, not just for the companies in it, but also for ticket buyers and
mm,
for concert goers. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was interesting. It was one of those ones where they sort of say, okay, call for evidence, and here is a bunch of questions we'd like to answer. And I think, as is often the case, that the questions they're asking kind of give you a good hint about what they're investigating and who's in the crosshairs, doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely. That was what I was going to ask. Who do you what do you think their objective is, and can you tell from the way they've worded the questions?
Yeah, so some of the questions were things like, okay, what barriers affect new or smaller promoters, venues, or ticketing firms from competing on equal terms? That's the first question. And
Mm,
obviously, on equal terms with who is your immediate question with that. Are there exclusive deals or other similar practices that limit fair access to artists and venues? And are any major firms or vertically integrated groups using their market power to limit competition?
mm,
Which, and I'm a bit hazy, but vertically integrated means you are in several areas, from ticketing to promotion, for example, to venues. So
mm,
it all, to my mind, seemed to be pointing at Live Nation and Ticketmaster.
mm,
Because we've been having this whole year in the US, especially, of people looking at them and saying, are they too big? Is them being together causing issues? Is how they do business problem? And this feels like the UK politicians getting on there and say, well, if they can do that in the States, we're going to do it here. And it does feel a bit like, I mean, maybe I'm being oversimplifying it. You can tell me if I'm wrong. It does feel like all the questions are saying, a Live Nation and Ticketmaster rotters, tell us how they're rotters, and then we'll do something about it, maybe.
yeah, I mean, you
Um,
could. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yes, we could be reading too much into this. I mean, they could just genuinely want to know more about how the industry works. I mean, we know government has shown loads more interest in the live music scene over the past year, partly because they've identified live music as one of the areas that could provide growth, but also I think because a bunch of MPs didn't get Oasis tickets, and now and they wanted to find out why they didn't get Oasis tickets and why. And obviously there was everything. There was all the stuff about dynamic pricing and everything. So I
mm,
think there are questions to be asked, and maybe they want to know more to help inform future decisions when it comes to live music policy. But at the same time, and obviously I have to be quite careful here with my position as chair of live, but it does feel like that they are here possibly reacting to criticisms that they've heard of Live Nation, and now they want to know more about that. I mean, I don't know. It may even be something partly to do with the fallout from the budget, which is another story which we'll get to in a second. But we shall see. But it's very comprehensive. You can find it on the government website. And if you want to if you want to send them your own written submissions about what you believe is right and wrong about live music, answer their questions, let them know. Get your answers in as soon as possible.
After your Christmas party.
After your Christmas party.
Go home, get on the computer. That's never ends badly, does it?
Story 3, there's a new report from the charity Youth Music, which has exposed some of the dangers that young people face in the music industry. But it does also have a positive trend involving Ray.
Yeah, it does. So youth music is a really interesting. We've talked about it before. They do a lot of really good work around the country with youth groups, music education, just getting young people into music and also into the industry. And yeah, this poll is it's a lot of sort of sad, worrying things. So I think 72% of people they interviewed, so they have felt unsafe in a music industry work environment. 90% said they were being paid unfairly for their work. And 75% have considered giving up their aspirations in the industry or in music because of these unsafe or unfair conditions. And it's all these these quotes are coming out. There's one person who says, I was basically doing full-time hours and being paid for 7 hours a week. There was someone else who said it's quite normal to be groped by men in the workplace. So it's kind of setting out just stuff that young people in music have to deal with, which would be a really bleak report. But yeah, they mentioned Ray. So you know how Ray has talked out about all kinds of things, hasn't she? Like she's talked out about songwriters' royalties. She wrote a really powerful song about her experience of abuse within the industry at the hands of a producer. And it turns out that people feel inspired by that and they feel encouraged to speak out. And they feel like, okay, if Ray can speak out about this stuff, I can push back if I encounter unsafe things or unfair. So it was kind of, this is the problem, but this is kind of the pathway out of this. Is these inspiring artists who talk about it will encourage young people to not put up with this rubbish.
That's what we're looking for, though, isn't it? It's a new set of role models. I think that's what we, if you look back to when I was a lad, you were always looking for a role model who somehow spoke up for what you believed in, and that's what Ray is doing for obviously a lot of these people.
And it talks about some of the changes in law, like there's some new workplace rights law coming in the UK. And it says that will be a good thing, that will help some people, but that's not enough. And I think that was a message of this report saying by setting out the problems, we need to kind of, as an industry, also change the culture, I guess. That was one of the quotes actually from Youth Music. It was like, laws alone cannot reshape culture. The music industry has to read this and then act on it.
Any other business? Shall we start with the streaming economics? Because last week, and some of you may have seen this already, but the band Los Campesinos revealed just how much they made from streaming income. And I mean, it made for a really interesting insight, I think, into what artists make from streaming, but also within that, the differences in payment that they get from different streaming services. You've been through all the stats. Which one? Because it basically shows you a whole year's worth of income, and how it drops off when the new album comes out and it lands well, but then of course it drops off. But it gives you everything they made from Spotify.
Yeah, well, every streaming service. So yeah, this is for one album, All Hell, which came out in 2024. And the key part of that is it's their first album. I think they released it through their own label. So they have all the rights. They get all the royalties from the distributor. So they pay a subscription every year to put music up, and so they get 100% of their revenue. So it's a really good best case scenario for an artist. And so this album came out in 2024. It was streamed 9.3 million times in its first year. And that made the band nearly 32,000 quid in royalties from streaming. Bear in mind, they're a 7-piece band, which is where you start to go, hang on a minute, 32,000 doesn't go far when you're splitting it between 7 people.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's an average of about a third of a penny per stream. Or as they put it, it's a quid for every 20 full listens to the album. And that's across everything. But like you say, the interesting part is when they break down each streaming service, how many streams they had and what payment they got and what the effective per stream payment is, which I suppose is good to say it again. That's not how streaming services pay out. They didn't pay you this much per stream. they pay you your share of all their royalties, and then you can calculate what that is per stream. But anyway, so I think Spotify was nearly 3/4 of the streams and just under like 2/3 of their royalties, so about just over £20,000. But that meant it had the lowest per stream figure. So they got around 0.29 pence for every Spotify stream, whereas on Tidal, they got 0.75 pence.
Yeah,
So
that's a
more
big
than double.
difference. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and their point was if everyone had used Tidal, we would have received an extra nearly £32,000, so doubling their
Crikey.
royalties.
Right.
But this is the weird thing, and this is actually, I think it's a really good moment. And this is why it's a really good blog post to put this out there, and really, really appreciate them doing it, because you think, okay, if you're a fan going, well, why don't you just take music off Spotify? Tell everyone to go to Tidal, you'll make loads more money. But actually, if you take the music off Spotify, you're instantly saying goodbye to 2/3 of your streaming royalties. Because while its per stream rate is much lower, it's got so many more people that, I mean, for example, for Los Campesinos, it was, what was it? 2/3 of their revenue from streaming was from Spotify. So that's what you're saying goodbye to if you say, well, I'll go over here where the per stream rate is higher. Follow me, fans. And what you'll find is a lot of, not many fans do that. Changing streaming services is quite hard unless you're really cross about something.
Yeah.
So it's that thing. I think per stream rates do tell a certain story of what you get per stream, but the important thing is, well, how much money you're getting. What's your biggest source of thing? And the other thing, I think Spotify's argument always been that its per stream rate is lower because its users listen to lots of music. They're more engaged. So the royalties there are split between many more streams. So you get more money, but you get less per stream.
One of the other things which is really good about this piece was that, as you say, this is best case scenario where they own all the rights, so all monies come to them, and it felt like they're self-managed as well, so they weren't giving up X amount of money to a manager. And this is something which I know you're always very quick to point this out when we mention top-line streaming income. Most artists, however, are signed to a label and do have a manager. And of course, they will all take a cut. And I think it might surprise some people just how much the label takes and what's left for the artist. So they went through that as well, didn't they? Saying, well, we get £32,000. Obviously, as you say, split between 7 of us, but we get £32,000. Had they been signed to a label, they would have got, I think, what do they say, 20% of that?
I think it is, yeah. So a high end royalty rate would be 20%. So they would have got 6,400 quid, just under, of the 32,000.
And then, if you have a manager, then from that money, from the money you've received, then you give 20% of that to a manager, which must bring you down to about £5,000.
That's it. So, and this is, bear in mind, one album. So they have more albums, but yeah, it makes you realize how, for a lot of bands, especially at this level, I think the kind of established acts, but not the biggest streaming players, that their money really does come from everything, not just streaming, touring, merchandise, every way they can make money. This kind of band, you have to basically, I'm trying to think of the right word for it. You have to hustle, which, when you're also trying to be creative, is a challenge. But yeah, so it's a really good post for anyone who wants to know about what these numbers actually mean for a working band.
And also just how much, and we're quite often reporting on record labels and their record profits, but it just that wedge of money, the proportion of money that goes to the label from this is incredible, isn't it? And that's something else which we've mentioned, how this may change in the future with artists going, no, I'm going to keep more of my own rights. You can absolutely see why. When, if you're signed to a label, you've made 32 grand and you end up with 5 grand, people are thinking, hang on a second, should we try and do some more of this ourselves? Because, we're walking away with just a small proportion of what our money's actually earned.
Well, also, yeah, and it makes you, I think artists are getting more, not choosy is the wrong word, they're getting more aware of, like, okay, for example, a manager takes 20% of your income typically. That's in the post. So a good manager should be making you more money, should be helping you make more money to cover that cut and more. And if your manager isn't helping you make more money, then it's a drain, isn't it? And so I think that's one of the things artists were looking at, saying, okay, well, who am I giving money to? Are they doing a job that's helping us sustain ourselves? And if not, we're happy. Whether it's a label, whether it's a manager, I think it focuses the mind, doesn't it, on, hang on a minute, I'm giving this cut to them. What are they doing for us? And I think the other thing we've covered, I mean, there are loads of great people at labels. And we covered last week, didn't we, that report about indie labels and how much they give to artists and how they make their money.
Yeah.
A growing number of labels, when you talk to people who work there, they're like, yeah, we're feeling stressed. We're so busy. We've got so many marketing campaigns to work on. There's so much going on. Some people within the label world talk about how they feel like they can't give the artists enough attention as they'd like to. And that comes into this too. If you're on a bigger label and you feel like they're not really marketing you that much because they've got other priorities, again, your decision over who to sign with next time and when your contract ends will maybe be covered. So I think this is where, like, I don't know, a lot of musicians maybe don't like to think about money if they can avoid it, or don't want to think of themselves as business people. But I think in the modern world, you kind of have to be right. This is the money coming in. This is who it's going out to. Are they giving me the return on investment I want? And that's a very financial phrase, isn't it? Return on investment. But I think this post made me think this is the sort of thing that artists should be talking to each other about.
It's a really good piece, very measured, very pragmatic, but at the same time, obviously, clearly makes the point that it's not a lucrative business at their level. If there is a Los Campesinos Christmas party, it is not going to be at the Ritz this year. But hats off to them for just being so transparent. That's the thing, and that's what we'd like more of in the music industry, isn't it? So thank you very much for sharing the stats. You know, talking of transparency or lack of it, here's a story which, I mean, has had very little uptake, I think, at the point of recording this. We're recording Tuesday lunchtime, and it's something I did briefly allude to in passing last week when we were answering the question about matinee gigs. But I didn't go into it any further then because it would have complicated matters. But I think it is worth stopping for a second to take in the implications of the recent budget when it comes to music, and especially live music. But there was nothing really for the music industry in the budget the other week. Virtually nothing. But worse than that, there were some changes announced which this hasn't blown up as a story yet, but there were changes within the budget concerning business rates, which, and I don't want to sound like I'm a scaremonger, but it could be the final death knell for loads of venues. And this is the way. Let me give you the background for starters, because you might remember there was some talk, wasn't there, ages ago about the government bringing in a digital tax as one of the ways that they could make people like, I don't know, your major retailers, certainly one of them beginning with A, who sell just about everything, getting them to pay more tax in this country. And then, I don't know why, but that seemed to go away. And instead, there was a lot of talk about this idea of what was essentially a warehouse tax. The thinking being, well, if we can't get tax out of them any other way, we'll take it through taxing their warehouses, and we'll do that through adjusting the levels of business rates that they pay. So somebody goes off, works out a new formula for business rates, which has, and it's quite complicated, but there'll be different tiers of business rates and various multipliers, and all this will mean we can take some money from the top and help the people at the bottom. So we can take the money from the big online retail warehouses and give some of it back to the high street. Unfortunately, and I mean, I think this is partly down to the way government is laid out, with various different departments and random independent agencies all doing their own thing, and I don't think they properly communicate along the way. So what this budget actually managed to do, though, was firstly not pull off the warehouse tax on major online retailers properly, but it's also now dragged in all our larger music venues to this new top tier of business rates, to the point where one of our best known arena venues, which I shan't name for now, but you can probably guess, it's in London, their business rates under the new regs, their business rate could go up by around 80%. That's 80%, an 80% increase in business rate for a major live arena venue, which, I mean, in turn could, and quite possibly very well might, lead to your ticket prices having to go up by £2 or £3 a ticket. That's what people are saying. £2 or £3 per ticket to help cover the increase in the business rates. And I mean, I know everyone thinks, big arenas are raking it in and the promoters are having a field day with all these big top end gigs. But there are still shows at that level which are kind of on a financial knife edge. And I don't think, there's already talk that some of these gigs, they just won't happen now because the costs are too high. Because if you think the business rate has gone up, if you're an outside promoter coming in, then the arena is going to have to charge you more to cover their costs. So the promoter will take on more, it's more debt, if you like. They will have to. How are they going to get it? How are they going to get this money back? Because the hire of the venue is much more expensive. Well, it's going to be passed on, isn't it? It's going to be passed on to the audience. And I mean, I sympathise obviously with the big venues, but it's insane, right? We're going to tax. Should we just say it? We're going to tax Amazon. We've accidentally taxed the big venues, the big arena venues. But the thing is, though, I mean, I will say, venues like this at the top end, they're flexible enough to be able to, probably swallow the increase. I mean, they won't want to. Who wants an increase of 80% in your tax bill? But they will probably survive, even if it's us who helps pay to keep them afloat. But the other end of the scale, and this is where it becomes an absolute disaster, because I mean, we can't entirely put all the blame at government door for this, because alongside the new tiers of business rates, there was a restructuring of business rates, which was done by the Valuation Office Agency, who I'd never come across till last week. The VOA, they're independent of government, but they have come up with a complete reevaluation of business rates for properties across the country. And this has thrown everything up in the air, because rather than doing what we hoped government would do, or this policy would do, which would be to reduce business rates for small businesses, including grassroots venues, the reevaluations have effectively, according to figures from the Music Venue Trust, it effectively means that business rate relief for small venues, after you take into account all the multipliers and everything, the rate relief is going to be around 12%, and that's down from 40%. And it was hard enough struggling along when you got business rate relief of 40%. Now it's down to 12. But, and this is what really fried my mind when it was explained to me, the VOA work out a business rate value for a building from the maximum amount of money that they think that building could make. So, for example, you own number 4, the High Street. You run a venue there. You put on local bands, and support the community. You make a minimal amount of profit, but you are enriching your town's cultural experience. I mean, you're doubtless on the breadline, because let's not forget, from a report earlier this year, a huge percentage of grassroots venues are operating on a 0.05% profit margin. It's so precarious. And the average annual profit for a grassroots venue last year was just over £3,000. Just over £3,000 a year, that is. But of course, instead of this, I mean, this isn't obviously a factor for the VOA. Instead, as I say, the VOA look at the building and the potential value of it, and then they rate it according to what they think the maximum amount of money could be made out using those premises, out of those premises. Do you see what I mean? So what they're saying is they're not setting the business rate for a creative hub. They stand outside number 4, they look at the building and think, well, if this was a Poundland, this would make X amount of money. Or imagine this was a successful pizza takeaway business. Crikey, they'd be delivering money to the bank in truckloads. And that's the amount of money. It's the profit that they think the building can make, not necessarily what you're actually doing or the profit that you are making. And that's how they calculate how much a building's business rate is, which, I mean, It sounds like madness to me, but that's the way two industry experts explained it to me. Two very frustrated industry experts explained it to me earlier in the week. I mean, if anyone has more knowledge and wants to chip in, we are all ears. But as it stands, because of the new rates, how the racing valuations, because of this, and because these places aren't pizza restaurants, they're grassroots. More than 100 grassroots music venues are now looking at increases in April when the rates change of more than 50%. That's a 50% increase in your business rates, a reduction in rate relief. There are a few venues which apparently their rates will go up by over 100%. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back. This, and I know some people will say, "Oh God, you're always saying this, LeMay. You're always banging on about how many venues are going to close." And not that many venues closed last year, particularly compared to previous years. And to them, I also, you're right. But can I also point out that more than 200 venues needed emergency support just to stay afloat this year? And others are scraping by simply because the people who run them aren't paying themselves anymore. Look, they made it through COVID. They've soldiered on through rent rises and sky-high energy prices. And now, I'm very sad to say, unless someone has a rethink, then honestly, scores of venues could be closed by this cock-up. Starting in when the changes come around in April, unless something is done about this, because the government who claims to care about the arts have just got themselves into this almighty mess with this. I don't even think they understood what they were doing or what the outcome was going to be. But I can tell you what the live music industry are saying. One executive said to me this week, and I quote, "This policy is a, quote, total disaster." And it's just a mess. As I say, caused partly by the split between different agencies. Because on the one hand, you have DCMS, the Culture Department, who've been really supportive of music and venues and are doing things to make the fans' experience better. But then on the other hand, of course, you have the Treasury, which always seems to have a lot of power, and the Treasury obviously is interested in money and balancing the books more than anything else. And then you add into this the loose cannon of the VOA, which is working to its own brief, and hey presto, something with good intentions ends up being an absolute fiasco, really, because the outcome of all this is a complete contradiction of everything that the government's been saying about nurturing growth and identifying music and live music particularly as an area of growth, supporting creative industry. It's the opposite of that. And one of the reasons this is most annoying, although obviously this is now very timely, we have a board meeting of the live music industry trade body tomorrow. So when you're listening to this episode, I'll be in a meeting with some of the key players in the live music industry. And it was only about 10 days ago, I was thinking, this will be quite a nice meeting, I think, if things seem to be going in the right direction. We've made some real progress this year on green issues and diversity. We've launched the Live Trust, providing funding for grassroots. Hard year, but it's been a really good year. Pass the mince pies. Let's have a glass of alcohol-free mulled wine, please. Now it's going to be a room full of very respected people from the live industry, all calling out a government policy that puts, the precarious lives of venues and musicians at even more risk of hardship. And it's right from top to bottom. So that and the Department of Business and Trade's new inquiry into live music, I imagine is going to make for quite a tense meeting. As regards the business rates, that will be, I imagine, one of the big discussions. So that will inform the response of the live industry, I think. We'll know more after the meeting, and then we'll see what happens in the coming weeks and days. But I don't know if you've got anything to add, Stuart, but thank you for letting me get that off my chest. You can probably hear how exasperated I am, because it makes me want to weep. It really does.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say I might order you some strong alcoholic mulled wine for your meeting, because you might need it. Do you know this whole story was in my mind this morning. I was writing about a different thing. So I was writing about, Polestar, the big live industry publication. Their table of like the top touring artists of the millennium. And top of it is Coldplay, who sold 24.8 million tickets and made nearly 2.5 billion of gross sales. And third is Ed Sheeran, who's done 19.6 million tickets and like 1.7 billion of gross sales. Like both of those acts, who themselves have said it, would be not here if it wasn't for the grassroots venues who are being hit by these rates. Like two of the three biggest grossing live artists of the last 25 years cut their teeth in those venues that are going to be there in April going, we don't know what to do. And it just kind of hits home the craziness of this. Even if you're the economic, even if you're the treasury, whose job is money, like you say, and growth, that's growth. The platform for the, and that's the insane unjoined upness of this, that you just need to look ahead. Who are the artists of the next 25 years who are going to make a load of money for Britain's economy?
Yeah, invest in the grassroots. It's your future. But there's a short-termism at play here, isn't there? There's a panic around balancing the books and stuff, which has meant we're not doing that. But I mean, I think music deserves some kind of tax relief in exactly the same way that the film industry does, and sporting stadiums I don't think are affected, and the film industry gets a 40% rate relief. So what are you going to do for music? While I calm down, do you want to do the and finally for this week? And finally, late Christmas presents for heritage rock music fans. What have you got?
Well, I got this press release. This might cheer you up. I got some press release from a company called Why Now Music, who do music merch and make really nice music merch, really good high quality stuff. And I say that so I can now lightly take the piss out of some of their latest stuff. But it was Mick Jagger and the Kinks, their latest clients. So Mick Jagger, you can buy knitted Mick Jagger socks, a cotton cap, some fine art prints, hand poured metal dice, and best of all, a Lucky in Love deck of playing cards. Lucky in Love being the 1985 solo Mick Jagger single that I'm sure everyone has fond memories of.
Yeah. That belter, remember that?
Yeah. But the second one I like, the Kinks tee. So, which is actually, it's not a ridiculous tie-in, because they had this song in 1971 called Have a Cup of Tea.
Yeah.
They made a song literally all about having tea. And it's got All Day and All of the Night tea, which is decaf. See what they did there with the title. Waterloo Sunset loose leaf tea. And it looks really nice, nicely done, nice packaging. And the best thing, the Kinks tea is like 7 to 10 quid each. So perfect timing for the Secret Santa. If you've got someone who's of the age. Mick Jagger socks, £11. That's a good price. So if you've got a rock fan of a certain age in your household or in Secret Santa. This is, do you know what it makes it? We should do something maybe next week on Christmas merch. I've seen a few artists come out with Christmas merch, like limited time jumpers, hats. Like it's clearly a time of year when artists have to think like retailers.
Yeah, well, it comes back to your point of making the most of every revenue stream available, doesn't it?
Yeah,
socks is the answer. Thank you very much for listening. We are over time, not just out of time, over time. If you are enjoying what we're doing here or trying to do, as always, can we ask that you try and spread the word, do a bit of advertising for us, just tell your friends, leave us a review online, repost the show on your socials, the sort of thing. Alternatively, you can support us via Patreon, which gets you, as a super fan, an additional 15-20 minutes of us. It'll be about 15 this week, I think, chatting about music and money. This week, we'll do, as mentioned, what age does Spotify think we are? Are smartphones ruining the dance floor, and what can be done about it? And possibly a couple of other matters. Whatever springs to mind, join us by becoming a super fan of the show at patreon.com/thepriceofmusic. Welcome Stacey, who's our newest super fan. A very timely Christmas present. Thank you, Stacey, for supporting us. Alternatively, if you'd just like to get in touch with us, you can drop us an email, anything you don't understand about how the industry works. I mean, there are weeks, as you can tell, where we don't understand how the industry or politics works either. But anything you think we might be able to make sense of, drop us a line. The Price of Music podcast at gmail.com for your questions or comments or reactions to anything in today's programme. Join us next week. I think it's the pop quiz. Is it the pop quiz next week?
It might be.
Yeah. We'll be facing questions set by super fans and producer Joe. I'm not sure which I'm more scared of. Super fan questions, possibly. Anyway, have a listen. It could be very embarrassing. We'll be back next Wednesday. For now, ta-ra.